Family. Leave a comment if you want more. Next update. Fuck this cultivation world. Blank. Chapter 11. Rick held back the urge to honk at Hound, who was taking his sweet time to comfort and feed his horse. He had completely forgotten about the damn thing, but Hound did not. As can be seen when he rubbed the red slap mark on his cheek, delivered to him by Hound when he tried to speed past the horse trailer instead of stopping. You should have stopped, Hawk mumbled out while checking his gun from the seat beside him. Rick didn't bother to dignify that with a response. HOOOOONK. Rick winced and shot an annoyed glare forward. Of course, it was Merle. The man leaned halfway out of the car's roof window, cigarette in one hand, elbow hanging out lazily like he was on a Sunday drive. He grinned like a bastard and slammed the horn again, longer this time, just to be a jackass. Rick swore he could feel his blood pressure spike. Come on, Merle yelled over the roof of the car, his voice carrying across the quiet street. What's the holdup? We're gonna ride in on horseback like fucking cowboys or something. He got smacked in the back of the head by Andrea, who was less than pleased by all the loud noise he was making. Don't honk the fucking car. You want us all to get fucking surrounded. He merely continued to laugh, high off his fucking rocker. Hound finally stepped away from the trailer, dusting his gloves off as the last latch clicked into place with a heavy thunk. He gave the horse a final pat on the neck, murmured something low and quiet to it, probably a damn lullaby, for all Rick knew, then turned toward the car. His boots crunched softly over the gravel as he approached, calm and unhurried. Rick watched him in the mirror, practically vibrating in his seat, every muscle tight with barely restrained urgency. The back side door opened, and Hound climbed back in like he'd just returned from a casual stroll, not delaying what felt like the most important moment of Rick's goddamn life. He looked at Rick, and nodded once. Rick exhaled through his nose, a long, slow breath he'd been holding in for what felt like an eternity. His grip on the wheel eased. Finally, he muttered under his breath, rubbing his cheek again. Then he leaned his arm out the window and waved it in a wide arc toward Glenn's car up ahead. The message was clear. No more delays and no more stops, they were rolling out. Glenn gave a quick thumbs up from the side mirror, and the lead vehicle started forward, tires crunching over broken asphalt. Rick shifted gears and followed close behind, the horse trailer bumping gently behind them as they passed beneath the skeletal tree line and rolled deeper into Atlanta's ruins. He didn't know what he was going to find at the end of this road, but he knew who he was looking for. He was going to find them. God damn it, he was going to find them. Shane adjusted the strap of his rifle across his shoulder as he walked a slow circle around the edge of the camp, eyes sweeping over everything like a hawk watching its territory. The late afternoon sun beat down across the camp and surrounding trees, casting long shadows and drawing sweat down the back of his neck, but he didn't stop. Keeping the camp running wasn't just a job anymore, it was survival. And if he didn't stay on top of everything, everything was going to go to shit. A few kids were stacking empty water jugs by the storage tent, laughing too loudly for his liking. Shane gave them a sharp look, and their laughter quickly died down. They got the message. To his right, Dale was on watch, perched near the camp's front edge with binoculars and walkies. He nodded to him as he passed, earning a quick nod in return. He rounded the far end of the RV and scanned the back row of tents. Andrea's sister was cooking a fish she caught while a few older folks were folding blankets or washing down by the water barrels. Every piece of order here was a thread holding the camp together, and Shane had become the one stitching it all day after day. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't even close. But it worked. They were alive, safe, and fed. And that counted for something. His eyes drifted toward the far corner of camp, past the fire pit and a line of hung-up laundry fluttering in the breeze. That's when he saw them. Shane's pace slowed. Lori was crouched next to a large plastic bin, carefully folding freshly dried clothes while Carl sat beside her, separating socks with a look of boredom on his face. There they were, the two people who made all of this worth it. Carl let out a huff as a pair of socks slipped from his lap, and Lori laughed gently, brushing his hair back as she leaned in to help him. Her sleeves were rolled up to her elbows, her cheeks pink from the sun, and she looked alive. And in that moment, nothing else mattered. Shane's chest eased, his expression softening into a rare, unguarded smile. Lori looked up, saw him, and smiled back. It wasn't a long look, just a few seconds, but it felt warm in. Our runners are back. Dale's voice rang out from atop the RV, breaking the calm like a rock through glass. And another car is following them. The camp shifted instantly. Shane's smile dropped, and his entire posture changed. Unless they found another usable car in the city, the car following them belonged to someone not part of their group. He turned on a dime and started walking fast toward the front perimeter, weaving through curious onlookers already moving to see what the commotion was about. Dale was squinting through a pair of binoculars, hand shielding his eyes from the sun. Shane climbed the RV ladder quickly and stepped up beside him. What is it? They made it back, Dale said, handing Shane the binoculars. But they aren't alone, there's another car behind them. Can't see much from here, but it's armored, and dragging a horse trailer. Shane blinked. A horse trailer? That got a few confused murmurs from below. People were gathering now, glancing between each other and the road, curiosity mixing with unease. He lifted the binoculars to his eyes and focused in. Sure enough, their beat-up vehicle was at the front, headlights flashing briefly as it turned off the road toward the camp. The second vehicle behind it was far more of a mystery. Sleek, dark, reinforced with matte plates and odd metal seams that weren't standard issue. The trailer attached to the back jostled lightly as the car followed, kicking up dust. He couldn't see much through the tinted windshield, but something about the way it moved made the hairs on his arms stand up. Who the hell is that? Dale asked, his voice a bit more cautious now. Shane lowered the binoculars slowly, his jaw tight. We're about to find out. He turned and called down to the others. All right, listen up. Our runner group is back, but they've got company. Nobody panic, just stay alert. Keep the exits clear, and don't start anything unless someone gives you a damn good reason. People nodded and began to move, the air buzzing with tension. Lori stepped toward the center of the camp with Carl clinging close, her eyes flicking toward Shane. He met her gaze and gave the slightest nod, reassurance, for now. But inside, his stomach was a knot of uncertainty. Because if someone else had found them out here, especially someone organized enough to own that vehicle, then their safe little bubble might be about to pop. And if it came down to it, he would sacrifice everyone in the camp for Lore and Carl. He would keep them safe. No matter what it took. The cars rolled to a slow stop just outside the gravel boundary of the camp, kicking up a wave of dust that drifted lazily through the air. People were already gathering near the RV, eyes wide with curiosity and tension, murmurs rising with each passing second. The first door opened on Glenn's car. Amy was the first to react, bolting from the line of laundry with a gasp. Andrea barely had time to turn before her little sister flung herself into her arms, nearly knocking them both over. The older woman wrapped her arms around Amy with a relieved, tearful laugh, squeezing her like she'd come back from the grave. You came back. Amy laughed into her sister's shoulder. I'm fine, Andrea whispered back, her voice thick. I'm here, okay, I'm here. From the passenger side, Morales stepped out and grinned the moment he spotted his family by their tent. MIA more kids. He sprinted across the open ground, arms outstretched, laughing with pure joy as his wife ran to meet him. His kids clung to his legs the moment he dropped to one knee, and he hugged them all as if they were his entire world. Merle was next, swaggering out of the backseat with a smirk and his usual drawl. Where's my baby brother at? Shane, slowly getting down the RV ladder, answered flatly. Out hunting. TCH. Course he is. Merle chuckled, slapping dust off his pants. Boys always sniffin' around in the woods. Jackie and T-Dog exited quietly after that, scanning the camp like they were seeing it with fresh eyes. They didn't run to anyone, nor did anyone run to them, but they smiled at the sight of families reuniting. Glenn stepped out last, hands on his hips, grinning at the scene like he'd just brought Santa Claus home in the trunk. But Shane's eyes weren't on any of them. His gaze was fixed on the second vehicle, the armored one. The dark beast of a car that sat like a coiled animal, its windows tinted too dark to see inside. No one had come out yet. Just the faint creak of metal from the trailer behind it showed any indication of life. Shane narrowed his eyes and climbed down the ladder, boots hitting the dirt with purpose as he marched toward Glenn. He didn't waste time. Who the hell are they? He demanded, his words sharp. Glenn opened his mouth, clearly excited. Shane, man, you won't believe this. It's. But the click of a car door swinging open cut him off. Every head turned at once. The camp fell silent, keeping a nervous eye on the newcomer. The back passenger door of the armored vehicle closed with a soft thunk, and a man stepped out into the light. Uniforms, boots, and a sheriff's badge on his chest. Shane recognized the man the moment he laid eyes on him. Rick Grimes. Alive. Shane's breath caught in his throat. His feet locked in place. The man he'd buried in his heart and mourned in silence, stood there, flesh and blood and real as the dirt underneath his feet. The shock hit Shane like a bullet to the gut. Rick, he whispered, barely audible. He wasn't the only one who recognized who the man was. Dad. Carl's voice cracked like thunder through the stunned quiet. Shane turned just in time to see the boy tear past him, legs pumping, eyes wet with tears. Rick dropped to his knees as Carl collided with him in a desperate, crushing hug. The man wrapped his arms around his son, holding him so tight it looked like he'd never let go again. Carl buried his face in Rick's stomach, sobbing openly, words pouring out between gasps. I knew you were alive. I knew it. I knew it. I'm here, Rick choked out, voice thick, eyes squeezed shut. I'm here, I'm right here. Shane looked behind him, and his heart froze. Lori stood frozen, her arms limp at her sides, mouth slightly agape. Her heart was thudding so hard in her chest it felt like it might crack open, but she couldn't make her body believe what her eyes were seeing. She let out a strangled breath as tears welled up in her eyes, the bin of laundry forgotten beside her. Carl's cries echoed in her ears, tugging her like a lifeline back toward the man they had both thought was gone forever. Then she ran. Across the camp, through the dust and the murmurs and the stunned silence of the crowd. Rick barely had time to look up before she collided into him, arms wrapping around both him and Carl in a desperate embrace that shook with every breath. She buried her face in his neck, sobbing openly now. Rick, oh my God. I'm here, Rick whispered again, voice cracking. He held them both as if they were made of glass and he'd been through hell to piece them back together. Carl's little arms stayed locked around his waist, face hidden in his shirt, while Lori clung to his back like she'd never let go again. Shane stood frozen, heart pounding in his chest like a war drum. Everyone else around them seemed to vanish. And for a long moment, nothing else in the world mattered. The camp stood still. Soft murmurs broke the silence, scattered voices. Some smiled quietly at the reunion. Others glanced sideways at Shane, confusion and curiosity in their eyes. He didn't meet any of them. Shane stood stiff near the RV, his hand rubbing the back of his neck, eyes locked somewhere off in the distance. He couldn't look, couldn't stand to look. He'd prepared for 1,000 different emergencies. Raiders, walkers, and a collapse of order in camp. But this, Rick Grimes walking back from the grave and hugging the very people Shane had come to see as his. No plan covered that. No part of him knew what to do with the shame twisting deep in his gut, or the way his heart squeezed when Lori didn't so much as glance his way. She was wrapped up in Rick now. Back in his orbit. Like Shane had never existed. He swallowed hard and looked down, pressing his tongue to the inside of his cheek, jaw tight as a drum. The sounds of sobbing and joy hurt more than they should have. He'd fought so hard to keep them safe. He'd loved them. But he wasn't Rick. And Rick was back. After what felt like forever, the hug finally loosened. Rick pulled away just enough to wipe Carl's tears and brush Lori's hair gently back from her face, cupping her cheek with shaking fingers. He kissed her forehead, whispering something only she could hear. Then he turned. Rick's eyes scanned the camp until they landed on Shane, and without hesitation, he approached. Shane blinked, startled. He straightened slightly, as if bracing himself for something he couldn't define. Rick didn't speak right away, he just reached out. And pulled Shane into a hug. Shane's eyes widened, caught completely off guard. Rick's voice was full of gratitude. Thank you for keeping them safe. I don't know how I can ever repay you. Shane hesitated, his meeting Lori's who quickly turned away, and his jaw clenched. Then slowly, his hands rose and clapped Rick's back once. Harder than necessary, tense and stiff. I did what I had to, he muttered, unsure of what else to say. Rick pulled back with a tired smile, nodding once, his hand gripping Shane's shoulder in thanks. Shane nodded back, forcing a small, tight smile. But inside, everything was unraveling because Rick was back. And nothing would ever be the same. He coughed and pulled out of the hug, taking a step back away from Rick. How are you here? Rick hesitated at Shane's question, before glancing behind him with a flicker of realization. The second car still hadn't opened. The dark armored vehicle sat quiet and still like a beast at rest, but Rick could feel them watching. He rubbed the back of his neck, eyes flicking from Shane to the car, then back again. Yeah, he muttered, almost to himself. Right. Rick turned fully, shoulders lifting with a deep breath before letting it out slowly. I'll explain, just hold on. Shane watched, jaw still tight, as Rick jogged back toward the armored vehicle. His boots kicked up soft puffs of dirt as he went, and Shane's eyes narrowed as his brother in all but blood approached the tinted rear window on the driver's side. Rick leaned down, speaking to someone inside. The words didn't carry, not enough to hear from this far, but whatever he was saying it quietly, almost like someone trying to convince a shy dog it was safe to come out from under the porch. Shane's eyes didn't move from them. Not even when Dale stepped beside him and whispered, "You know that guy?" Shane just nodded his head once, lips pressed into a thin line. Rick spoke firmly to the people inside the vehicle, then took a step back and gestured toward the camp, clearly urging them to exit. There was a pause, a long, silent pause. And then, the car door cracked open. Shane felt the mood shift instantly. The low groan of the reinforced metal echoed unnaturally loud in the stunned quiet. A boot stepped out. It was thick, black, and plated. The figure stood tall, wearing sleek matte armor and weapons that draped over his shoulder. And then came the mask. A dragon's face, carved from bone or something like it. It was worn, weathered, and utterly inhuman. Hollow sockets stared out at them, shaped into a permanent expressionless stare. Another door opened. Then another. 2 more masked figures stepped out, each one different, but all eerily similar in how they moved. Coordinated and controlled, like wolves let off a leash but not quite free to run. One of them reached down and patted the German shepherd by his side. Another paused to calmly tighten a glove. Shane's hand immediately dropped toward his rifle. And he wasn't the only one. Dale tensed beside him. Amy cursed under her breath, and Lori quickly brought her son closer to her side, while whispering, "What the hell?" The camp was locked in sudden, rigid silence. Mothers held their kids close. A few of the men from the tents reached instinctively for whatever blunt tools or weapons they had nearby. Rick raised his hand quickly, stepping between the masked figures and the gathering camp. Hey, it's all right, he called, voice calm but firm. They're with me. He turned, arms still spread slightly, trying to appear open, non-threatening. I know they look intense, he said, choosing the word carefully. But they saved my life. When I woke up in the hospital, there was no one there. No staff and no help. I barely made it out of bed before I passed out. He looked at the camp again, meeting Shane's eyes. They found me, at least, their leader's name, Rick said, nodding toward them who now stood with their arms loosely folded, heads slightly tilted. His name's Leo. He was looking for medical supplies before he found me, bandaged me, and fed me. Rick paused, his voice softening. He gave me supplies, weapons, and even some of his men just to help me find my family. Shane squinted, gaze darting between the masked men and Rick. And you trust them? He asked in disbelief, not moving his hand from his weapon. With my life, Rick answered without hesitation. There was no bravado in his voice, no forced confidence. Rick turned again, walking slowly toward the center figure, the one in the black mask. He clapped him on the shoulder like an old friend. Shane couldn't explain it, but the way that mask moved, like it was studying them. Not like a threat, exactly, but like someone taking notes of weaknesses and strengths before walking into a room full of potential targets. They're friendly, he repeated firmly. Just, maybe not the chatty kind. Shane stared at the masked men a moment longer. The one with the hood scanned the tree line behind them, as if seeing something they couldn't see. The one wearing a doctor's coat was looking around, observing the people. And the leader, who Rick was standing by, hadn't moved. But somehow, Shane felt like he was staring straight into his soul, watching and judging. Still, Rick was here. And these people were the reason. Shane lowered his hand from the gun grip, though the tension in his shoulders stayed. All right, he muttered, but I want eyes on them at all times. The masked men hadn't spoken a single word. But their presence alone was already affecting the whole camp. And something told Shane, they weren't just passing through to bring Rick back to his family. Blank. I want to punch him so fucking bad, Hound growled in their link while glaring daggers at Ed Pelletier who was busy ordering his wife around. Not yet, Hound, Hawk ordered him while keeping an eye on Shane, the one who was labeled a wild card. Not until we can make it look like an accident. Their stance was relaxed, but anyone who knew them would notice the subtle tells. The deep breath they took to calm down, the slow drag of their eyes across each cluster of survivors, the twitch of a gloved finger as it brushed the stock of weapons on their person. Their eyes didn't rest in one place for more than a few seconds. They noted the strong ones, the nervous ones, the loudmouths, and the liabilities. A few had knives on their belts, some carried makeshift spears or bats. Hawk had seen all types before. It was Shane who set his internal alarms buzzing. The man's shoulders were drawn tight like a stretched-out wire, the kind of posture that said he would survive not by luck, but by choosing to be the last bastard standing. They didn't miss the way Shane looked at Rick, like something he owned had been ripped right out of his chest. He might be a problem in the future, Hawk muttered through the link, his voice low and dry. Agreed, Hound replied, arms still folded across his chest, jaw visibly tight behind the carved dragon mask. Give me 5 minutes and I'll solve it. We're not solving people yet, Doc cut in, his tone soft but resolute. Let's not start something until we have logistics established and a formal sit representative on the living conditions here. Always so boring, Doc, Hound muttered. I'm literally you, Doc answered coolly. He stood just a little apart from the others, his long coat fluttering slightly in the breeze. And for the record, I called dibs on punching that Ed guy. If you do it first, I'm going to, accidentally, inject you with a paralytic. Just enough to make you piss yourself. If they weren't being watched, Hound would have sicked Coco on him. Try it, nurse boy. See how that goes for you. Are you two done? Hawk snapped, his voice razor sharp. We're being watched, focus. He wasn't wrong. The camp hadn't relaxed despite what Rick said, not even a little. While some returned to folding laundry or comforting their kids, most were still casting sidelong glances at the newcomers. Rick's reassurance only went so far. Hound's hand twitched toward his belt, his attention focused back on Ed. I can make it look like a walker bit him during when he goes to take a piss. Not yet, Hawk repeated through gritted teeth. Doc, meanwhile, had pulled a battered notebook from one of his coat pockets and began jotting things down with a pencil stub. You're not fixing anything until they relax around us, Hawk reminded him. Doc didn't look up. I'm just taking notes. Camp stretched thin, Hound noted, looking at the rather malnourished faces. Their defense perimeter is laughable. No simple alarm lines, only one lookout point, and 0 fallback points, Doc added. All of this could collapse if a herd stumbles through. Or raiders, Hound muttered darkly before turning his attention to. A child's laugh rang out nearby, soft, tired, but genuine. They all turned slightly. It was Carl. Rick's son was clinging to his father's hand now, looking up at him like he was the son while talking about everything he went through while he was gone. At least someone's happy, Hawk said after a moment, voice more distant. Doc looked over his shoulder toward the horse trailer. Are we still bringing Daisy out? Of course, she deserves to walk on grass again. Besides, she's more emotionally intelligent than half of the people in this camp. Careful, Coco might get jealous. Hawk lightly teased their dog specialist. Hound desperately wanted to flip him off, but couldn't with all the eyes on them. Despite themselves, a faint thread of amusement curled between them. The link fell quiet for a beat. Then Hawk broke the silence, serious this time. Orders are the same. We stay invisible, unless someone needs help, and if anyone causes problems. Their masks gave off ominous intent. 29 comments 0 vote. Chapter 12. Crunch. Leave a comment if you want more. Next update. Monkey see. Monkey do. Blank. Chapter 12. They drove in silence. Mother and son did not say a word as the car hummed along the winding road, the school growing smaller in the rearview mirror. The only sounds were the low rumble of the engine and the occasional sound of tires against pavement. Minutes passed as the silence prevailed. Then finally, she spoke, her voice soft but steady. Wanna talk about what happened at school? She didn't look at him right away, just kept her eyes on the road, hands firm on the steering wheel, but she glanced at him out of the corner of her eye. Her son shifted in his seat. His head bowed low, his small frame curled inward like he was trying to disappear. I punched my teacher, he mumbled, voice cracking, almost swallowed by the hum of the car. She knew that much, but her 10-year-old son can knock out a grown man is beyond her. His fingers clutched at the fabric of his pants, knuckles whitening, hands trembling in his lap. She frowned, her heart ached at the sight, an ache only a mother feels when her child is hurting and won't say why. She slowed the car and pulled over. And turned to look at her son. Can you tell me why you punched your teacher? She asked gently. There was a pause, a long one. His lips moved, but the words were too quiet to catch. I didn't hear that, she hummed, trying not to scare him. Sweetheart, please tell me why you punched Mr. Dalton. He bit down hard on his lower lip, as if trying to keep the words from spilling out. Then, with a shaky breath, he finally looked up, eyes glassy, face pale with guilt, and something else. Fear. I fell asleep in class, he said, barely above a whisper. I had another nightmare. She didn't interrupt, listening patiently. When Mr. Dalton tried to wake me up, I didn't see him. I saw. His voice hitched, his body trembling harder now. I saw a walking corpse. Its face was all rotten and its mouth was open and it was leaning over me like it was going to bite him. His voice broke. So I punched it. I didn't mean to punch Mr. Dalton, I thought. He choked back the rest, covering his face with both hands as tears slipped down his cheek. The silence returned, but this time it was painfully heavy. She reached out, one hand leaving the wheel to rest gently on his shoulder. Her thumb moved in slow, comforting circles, grounding him. It's okay, she whispered, voice as warm and steady as she could manage. You're okay. You're safe, I promise. His shoulders shuddered beneath her hand, quiet sobs escaping as he kept his face buried in his hands. Then, after a moment, she gave his shoulder a soft squeeze. Tell you what, she said, gently wiping a tear from his cheek with her sleeve. How about I make your favorite dinner tonight, huh? Extra crispy chicken tenders, curly fries, and what else? She playfully asked, trying to distract him. His hands slowly lowered from his face. His eyes were red and wet, his nose was sniffling, but despite it all, he gave her the tiniest, trembling smile he could. Mac and cheese, he mumbled, his voice still wobbly. She grinned and brushed a bit of hair from his forehead. Of course, can't forget the mac and cheese. He sniffed again and tried to smile wider, even as more tears gathered in his eyes. Thanks, Mom. She chuckled softly and tapped the tip of his nose with her finger. You're adorable, you know that. Immediately, his face scrunched up in protest as a faint blush colored his cheeks. I'm not adorable, I'm cool, he grumbled, folding his arms and pouting at the dashboard. Her laugh rang out, light and sincere. Cool and adorable can go hand in hand, you know. He groaned in mock defeat, but she could see the way he relaxed just a little in his seat. The way some of the weight seemed to lift from his shoulders. But even as she laughed, even as she comforted him and filled the car with warmth again, part of her heart still ached. These dreams, these nightmares. They were getting worse. And all she could do was be there for her son. Blank. The sun sat high in the sky, casting long shadows that crept between tents and fluttering laundry lines. Camp life moved with a tense sort of rhythm, people doing chores, others resting, but all carrying the weight of survival like a second skin. Shane walked the perimeter with practiced eyes, scanning, checking, always watching for trouble. Beside him, silent as a shadow, walked Hawk. The masked man said nothing, didn't so much as hum or grunt, and it was getting on Shane's nerves. How Rick managed to convince him to take Hawk on his patrol was beyond him. You gonna say anything, Shane muttered, or just walk there like a mute? Hawk tilted his head, the blank, dragon face of his mask catching the light for a moment before he responded. I figured I'd let you talk first, you seem the type. Shane snorted while waving at a passing survivor he was acquainted with. The type, huh? Hawk didn't answer that, he just kept walking at his side, boots crunching against the forest floor. Shane scratched the back of his neck, glancing sideways at him. So, you guys here to help? Or just scare the hell out of everyone and make us guess? We're here to help, Hawk said simply. Whether you believe that or not's up to you. That right, Shane squinted. You don't exactly inspire a whole lot of confidence, sneaking around, saying damn near nothing, wearing those creepy ass masks. Makes people wonder what you're hiding. We're hiding a lot, Hawk said without hesitation, already knowing Shane was never going to fully trust them. Shane blinked, thrown off by how confidently he said that. That's supposed to be funny. Are you laughing? Quote. They walked in silence again, rounding the far edge of camp, where some chairs and a fire pit sat unused. You hunt? Hawk asked, breaking the quiet this time. Shane raised a brow, not expecting him to ask that question of all questions. Yeah, whenever I get the chance. Used to do it with Rick sometimes, out by the lake. Those were the days. Ever fish? Another unexpected question. Why was this guy asking him these random things? They passed by Glenn, who was busy cooking a can of beans with a smile on his face. The smile got even bigger when Hawk waved at him as they walked by. Hell yeah, me and Rick fished damn near every weekend before everything went to hell. What about you? Hawk gave a short nod before answering. Fishing's my favorite pastime. That surprised Shane more than it should've. You, fishing, thought you boys were too busy skulking through the dark and scaring the shit out of people. Doesn't mean I can't enjoy a hobby, Hawk replied with a shrug. Shane huffed a laugh at him, not disagreeing with what he said. Suppose not, watch sports before all this. Not really. Figures. Though I always liked hockey. Of course you like hockey, Shane said, grinning a little now. Figures you'd like the only sport where punching a guy is part of the damn game. Hawk shrugged. They walked a few more steps before Shane glanced over again. So why, Hawk, that your call sign or some shit? The answer he got was short and fast. Shot 5 walkers and a hawk with 1 bullet. Shane stopped walking and stared at the man. Bullshit. Bullshit or not, Hawk replied without missing a beat. It's how I got my name. How the hell do you even? Never mind. That's the dumbest thing I've heard all day. Hawk just stared at him. Shane grumbled something under his breath and shook his head, but there was the ghost of a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. That's when the shouting started. A sharp, ugly voice rose from across the camp like a crack of thunder. Sophia, get your ass away from that masked freak. Both men immediately turned toward the noise. Shit, Shane muttered, already moving. Hawk sighed to himself when he spotted who it was causing the ruckus, facepalming. It had barely been a fucking day, Hound. Blank. Hound felt the eyes following him and Coco as they walked around the camp. He didn't need to look to know who was watching. Practically everyone was. Despite it being a whole day since they've been here. That was the thing about wearing a dragon mask for a face, people noticed. And they feared what they couldn't understand. He and Coco made a slow, casual circuit around the perimeter, eyes darting to weak spots in the defense, the way some tents were too far out from the rest, and the unsecured supplies that were unguarded. He said nothing, but noted everything. Eventually, he returned to the side of the RV and sat down on an old metal cooler, the frame creaking under his weight. He unsheathed his combat knife and dragged a whetstone slowly along the blade with rhythmic precision. SHHHK, SHHHK, SHHHK. Each motion carved through the silence with quiet menace. If they weren't scared before, they were probably pissing themselves now. Coco sat beside him, alert but calm, ears twitching at distant sounds. Her fur was dark and glossy, her eyes sharp and intelligent as they swept across the camp with practiced ease. Hawk and Doc had disappeared some time ago, probably doing recon, establishing entry points, or maybe just poking around for information like they always did. Hound didn't ask. Didn't need to. They'd report back when they were ready. Then, just beneath the sound of stone against steel, Hound heard something. Tiny footsteps. Light, hesitant footsteps. He froze mid-drag, the blade angled just so. Then slowly turned his head. A small army of children stood behind him in a loose semicircle. You should. No, you. All of them stared wide-eyed at Coco. None of them dared to move closer, despite clearly wanting to. Their little hands were clenched at their sides, feet fidgeting against the dirt, bodies practically trembling with restraint. The youngest looked like they were vibrating from the effort it took not to launch forward and bury their faces in Coco's fur. Coco, for her part, simply tilted her head, ears perked, tail wagging. Watching them as curiously as they were watching her. Hound smiled behind the mask. He turned his body just slightly toward them, knife resting across his knee, voice low and gentle. Well, he asked. You kids need something. The wall of children shuffled uncomfortably. Then, breaking the silence, a single voice spoke up. Carl Grimes led the charge. He stepped forward just a little, chin tilted up, voice steady despite the nervous flutter in his chest. Can we pet your dog? Hound blinked. He let the question hang in the air for a second. Then another. Just long enough to watch them all start to twitch and squirm like they were standing on hot coals. Even Carl's confidence faltered a bit under the weight of his silence. Then he turned to Coco. The shepherd was already looking up at him, eyes wide, ears pinned slightly back, tail giving a single hopeful thump against the dirt. Hound exhaled a quiet huff of amusement. Have it, he said, jerking his chin. The effect was immediate. A wave of delighted squeals and excited chatter erupted as the kids rushed forward all at once, arms outstretched, hands eager. Coco let out a low, happy boof and sat tall and proud, basking in the praise like she was born for it, absolutely putty in their hands. Little fingers scratched behind her ears, stroked her back, and giggled when she licked their hands or rolled onto her side for belly rubs. Hound just leaned back against the RV, blade forgotten for the moment. He watched with a smile as the dragon mask loomed behind a scene of innocent chaos. But all good things must come to an end. He heard them before he saw them, footsteps pounding on dirt, the sharp clatter of raised voices, and the unmistakable tone of parental panic. A group of adults, the children's parents, hurried to the kids in a flurry of urgency, their expressions a mix of fear, anger, and disbelief. There you are. What did I say about wandering off? Don't ever go near him without telling me. Mothers and fathers swarmed in, grabbing tiny arms and shoulders, pulling their kids back from Coco like they were snatching them from a live wire. The children whined in protest, a few trying to pet Coco one last time before being dragged away. She's nice. One kid cried, reaching back toward the shepherd. He let us. Another insisted. But the adults weren't listening. Their eyes kept flicking to his mask, and every glance carried suspicion and fear. As if they were trying to hide it but failing miserably. He said nothing. He simply watched, blade now sheathed, expression unreadable. The shepherd stood calmly amid the chaos, tail slowing but still wagging as the last of the children were pulled away. Coco's ears flicked, her gaze following the retreating figures, and she let out a soft, almost disappointed whine. And then, there were two. Carl and Sophia were the only ones left. The girl stood with her hands clasped around her doll, nervously shifting from foot to foot, but not retreating. Her mom, Carol, was nowhere in sight, probably still hanging damp clothes on the line or scrubbing something by the river. And Carl, he stood beside Coco with one hand resting on her back like it was the most natural thing in the world. His eyes glanced at Hound with curiosity, no fear in sight, and his body remained relaxed. Hound tilted his head slightly, watching both of them. After a moment of silence, he spoke. Your parents forgot about you too, or did you sneak off while they were busy? Carl gave a tiny shrug. Dad trusts you, and he knows I can take care of myself. Sophia looked up shyly while petting his canine. My mom is doing laundry and said I could play with the other kids, she murmured, not looking at him and looking only at Coco. She's really cute. Coco, as if understanding, stepped forward and gently nudged Sophia's hand with her nose. The girl giggled quietly and stroked her fur again, softer this time, more grateful. Can she do any tricks? One of my friends has a dog that can shake. She excitedly asks him, eyes full of expectation. Carl nodded in agreement, his head just as excited. Does she know any tricks? PFF'd. Listen here, Pipsqueak. Coco is the best dog. And I'll have you know I trained her myself. He said proudly, puffing out his chest with Coco doing the same. Carl and Sophia looked at each other before looking back at him. So she knows tricks? She asked again, hesitantly. He sighed to himself before nodding. Yes, she knows tricks, she knows all the tricks your little heart can ask for. That got them charged up. Really? All the tricks? He simply nodded his head. Sit. Sophia went first with something simple. Coco sat. Roll over. Carl went next with a little bit more complicated trick. Coco rolled. The kids clapped and wowed, giving his dog enough praise to inflate her head the size of Rushmore. Taking a moment to think, Sophia clapped when she came up with a command that she was sure Coco couldn't do. Do a flip. Coco did a flip. Whoa. The little girl gasped out in delight, which was followed by Carl's jaw dropping. Barrel roll. Carl jumped up and down. And would you believe it? Coco did a barrel roll. Sophia looked at Hound in awe and amazement, having a completely new opinion of him. Hound leaned back again against the RV, arms crossing as he watched them play with Coco, content. Of course, just as he was about to relax, he heard more footsteps coming his way. Hound sighed tiredly before looking to where the footsteps were coming from and tensed at who it was. Ed Pelletier, stomping towards them with an ugly scowl on his face with a fucking can of beer in his hand, clearly drunk out of his mind. Hound glanced at Sophia and frowned when he saw how she was now hugging her doll as if it was a lifeline. He stood up while whistling softly, causing Coco to become alert and stand guard in front of the kids. Ed's voice cut through the camp like a blade. Sophia, get your ass away from that masked freak. His words came slurred, sharp, and soaked in beer. The can in his hand sloshed with each angry step as he stormed toward them, red in the face, jaw clenched tight with ugly rage. Sophia flinched as she curled in on herself, arms tightening around her doll like she was trying to disappear. Carl stood his ground beside her, but even he shifted closer to Coco, his hand instinctively gripping the fur at her neck like she was his shield. Ed didn't care about how he was scaring the kids or how he was making his own daughter quiver in fear. Don't you go near my daughter, you son of a bitch. He barked, stepping forward and pointing the half-crushed can of beer like a weapon. I don't care what that motherfucker said. You think I'm gonna let some psycho with a mask lurk around my daughter? He tried to reach past them, his hand outstretched toward Sophia. Hound stepped in his way. No warning, no words. Just a wall of unmoving black armor hidden underneath his coat, and a cold, unreadable menace. Ed's hand stopped mid-reach, barely a breath away from Hound's chestplate. For a long moment, neither moved. Then Ed sneered, too drunk to realize the danger he was in. The hell you gonna do, huh? Big man with a dog and a Halloween costume. Fucking freak. Hound said nothing, just stared at the drunk man in front of him with disdain. Something dangerous shifted behind those hollow eye sockets, something that promised pain and agony. I'm talking to you, asshole. Ed shouted, stepping forward and throwing the only thing in his hand. The beer can hit Hound square in the chest. Foam splattered up his coat, soaking into the fabric. A few drops ran down the bone of his mask, sliding like rivers down a skull. Gasps erupted from nearby. More than a few heads turned. Murmurs started as they watched, like the bystanders they were. People stopped what they were doing. Dale came around the RV when he heard the sound of yelling. Amy and Andrea exchanged unsure looks as they stopped what they were doing to watch the ensuing disaster. Lori was stepping out of her tent along with her husband, both confused as to what the screaming was all about. Shane was already halfway to his feet from the other side of camp, glaring murder at Ed. Hound still hadn't moved. Carl and Sophia huddled behind Coco, who was now fully bristling, a low growl barely restrained in her throat. Her eyes locked on Ed like she was waiting for one command, just one, from her human to tear his throat apart. Hound's hands twitched at his sides. Every muscle in his body was screaming at him to punch this bastard. To break every bone in his body. To shatter his teeth on the gravel and let the mask be the last thing he ever saw. But he didn't. Not until Hawk gave the go-ahead. Ed puffed up in a way similar to a peacock, like he'd won something when Hound did nothing and said nothing. completely missing the way Hound's entire posture had shifted from calm to coiled, like a slaughter about to be unleashed at any moment. I knew it, Ed sneered. You ain't shit. Just a coward hiding behind a bitch-ass dog and a stupid mask. You're not scarring me. Hound tilted his head again, slow and deliberate. Did this motherfucker just insult Coco? Fuck it. He'll apologize to Doc later. Ed's sneer didn't last long. Hound's fist connected cleanly with Ed's jaw, a devastating punch that sent the drunk bastard crashing onto the dirt like a dropped sack of bricks. There was a sound, sharp, sudden, and brutal as his fist connected with the bastard's face. The sound was a satisfying crunch. And Ed Pelletier went tumbling down. The man didn't even scream, too stunned by the pain and impact as blood and two of his teeth splattered out from his mouth. The entire camp recoiled as if they were struck themselves. Gasps and screams rang out. Coco didn't move, she stayed rooted beside the kids, watching her human with unwavering focus as he dealt with the problem. Ed groaned in pain, trying to get up, but Hound wasn't finished. He stepped forward and loomed over the man like a judgment rendered in flesh. The mask tilted downward, casting a deep, skeletal shadow over Ed's bleeding face. He drew his knife, a long, gleaming blade unsheathed with a whispering slide of steel. The camp erupted in a gasp of shock, but they did nothing but watch like the fucking bystanders they were. Whoa, stop. Hound. Rick's voice cut through the noise like a gunshot as he rushed towards the man. Drop the damn knife. Shane screamed, getting there at the same time as Rick, gun drawn, already aiming it squarely at Hound. Hound didn't even flinch. He kept his focus on Ed, who was now on his back, scrambling backward with his elbows, heels scraping the dirt, eyes wide with pure fear and panic. Stop. Rick shouted again, turning to Shane. Put the gun down. You outta your damn mind. He's about to gut that bastard. Shane barked. I said drop it. Rick shouted, and then, without another word, he reached out and snatched Shane's gun right out of his hand. What the fuck? Shane turned, betrayed, stunned. Rick. I'll handle this, Rick said, eyes locked on Shane, not backing down. But Hound didn't react to either of them or the trash crawling on the dirt. His gaze had shifted, past Ed, past the adults gathering in a shocked half circle around them, and back, to the children. To Carl. To Sophia. Sophia was trembling, her little hands clutched her doll so tight the fabric groaned. Her eyes, those big, round, frightened eyes, were locked on him. No longer with admiration, but with fear. She reminded him of someone. Someone he hadn't been in a long time. Hound exhaled through his nose, low and heavy. Then, without warning, he moved. The knife came down, causing the people who were watching to either scream or look away in fright. But the knife did not penetrate flesh, but dirt. He stabbed it beside Ed's head, the tip burying itself inches from the man's skull. Ed flinched so hard he screamed, half rolling to one side like he expected to die right then and there. Silence and the smell of piss was strong. Leaning in low, close enough for his breath to ghost over Ed's bloodied cheek. He spoke just above a whisper, but with a voice colder than steel. The only reason you're not dead right now, is because of your daughter. Ed whimpered. Hound tilted his head slightly, his voice quieter still, just for Ed to hear, and no one else. So listen, and remember my words, you insignificant fucking worm, because the next time you do something that pisses me off, I will make you regret ever being born. His words were more of a promise than a threat. Do you understand? Ed nodded frantically, too terrified to speak, saliva mixing with the blood on his chin. Hound straightened up without another word. He yanked the knife from the earth and spun it once before sliding it back into its sheath. Then he turned his back on Ed, cold and without hesitation, and walked over to Carl and Sophia. They looked up at him, still shaken. He reached out and placed a gloved hand gently on Sophia's and Carl's heads. I'm sorry you had to see that. A silent apology only they can hear. Then turned and walked away, Coco trailing beside him, tail low. Rick knelt beside Ed, glaring at the man, but didn't say anything as he checked his broken jaw. Shane just stood there, gunless, confused, and angry. And around the camp, people whispered as they watched Hound walk away. 29 comments 0 vote. Chapter 13. Monsters and Men. Leave a comment if you want more. Next update. Walking Dead. One-man army. Blank. Chapter 13. What the hell do you mean, you're sending him to a mental hospital? She shouted, her voice cutting through the house like shattered glass. I mean exactly what I fucking said. He barked back, standing in the kitchen, his frame towering, fists clenched at his sides. He punched his teacher, saying some bullshit about a corpse about to bite him. The entire neighborhood is talking behind our backs, pointing their fingers at us. He was scared. He had a nightmare. A nightmare is one thing, but seeing a corpse in place of a person is another. He's clearly not right in the head. She marched toward him, fury in her eyes, trembling with the weight of everything she had held back. You don't get to twist this into something it's not. He is not violent, and he is not dangerous. He is a good boy. Our son. He's a psychopath in the making. He thundered, slamming his hand against the countertop. And your constant coddling is only making it worse. You're gonna get yourself fucking killed if you keep pretending nothing's wrong with him. Her face flushed red with rage. I am treating our son as the innocent child he is. She hissed, her voice low and sharp, trembling like a drawn bowstring. Because someone has to. Because you. She jabbed a finger into his chest, getting an angry glare from him. You gave up on him the second he showed signs of being different. He sneered, face twisting with contempt as he started walking out of the kitchen. I see the way he looks at people, like he's not even there, as if he's seeing things that no one else can see but him. You think that's fucking normal? He roared out, spit flying as he did. And you think locking our son away is going to fix him? She screamed, voice rising with desperation. He needs his parents, not people in lab coats who'll treat him as if he is insane. He needs love, understanding, and patience, god damn it. I'm doing my best, but I can't do it alone. He needs a father, Richard. And you sure as hell haven't been there for him. A bitter silence as they glared at each other, neither one backing down. Then the smell hit her. She narrowed her eyes, stepping closer, searching his face, and there it was. The faint wobble in his stance. The red flush in his cheeks, the way his pupils were just a little too wide. She sniffed once, then again. Her stomach twisted. Are you fucking drunk? She asked, quietly, horrified, making him take a step back. You promised me you would stop drinking. He scoffed, bloodshot eyes glaring down at her. That was before I found out our kid was a fucking monster. The words struck like a whip. Her heart stopped cold. Don't you fucking call him that. She growled, stepping towards him, hands clenched. He turned away from her, pacing back and forth. He is not a monster. She cried, her voice raw, cracking with weight. He's just a little boy, our little boy, who's terrified by his dreams. Who wakes up screaming and crying for his parents. Who doesn't understand what's happening to him. He's confused, he's hurting, and all you're doing is standing here and calling him things he's not. Like he's something we're just supposed to throw away and forget. Her voice broke, a sob catching in her throat. Why you're supposed to be his father. He punched the wall of their hole, leaving a crack in the wood. He's not normal. Wake the hell up. He roared, stepping closer. I see what you refuse to see. He's not right. No kid wakes up screaming about walking corpses unless something's wrong in his head. She did not back down. Something is wrong in your head if you think for 1 second I'm going to let you throw our son away like he's trash. Your son. That little monster is no. Get the fuck out of my house. She screamed, her voice raw, reverberating off the walls. You don't get to say that about him. You don't get to be here if that's how you see our son. Her chest heaved as she pointed toward the door, face flushed and wet with tears she refused to wipe away. Her husband's eyes narrowed, his jaw clenching as rage twisted across his face. You think yelling makes you right? He snapped, his voice dropping to something more dangerous. You think your bleeding heart means anything? That kid's going to kill you and you're too fucking blind to see it. And you're too fucking drunk to care. She snapped back, stepping closer until they were inches apart. You're nothing but a coward hiding behind a bottle and lashing out at a child because you're too fucking weak to handle reality. His face twisted, the words hitting something deep, something rotting inside him. And without war. Crack. His hand lashed out. Her head snapped to the side from the force of the slap. The sound echoed through the house like thunder, followed by the sickening thud of her body hitting the hardwood floor. She didn't move for a moment. Then slowly, shakily, she brought a trembling hand to her cheek, which was already blooming red and beginning to swell. Tears streamed down her face as she gasped in pain, disbelief, and heartbreak all at once. Richard towered over her, chest heaving, hands shaking, not with regret, but with barely contained urge to do more than just a slap. We should have gotten rid of him when we had the chance, he coldly spat out, before he turned and stormed toward the door. The whole house rattled as the door slammed shut behind him. She stayed there on the floor, alone, hands still pressed to her bruised face, staring blankly at the door her husband left through. She should have gotten up, should have picked herself up off the floor and fought back, screamed, raged, done something, anything. But she didn't. Her hand slipped from her cheek as her shoulders shook. The breath caught in her chest as a sob punched its way out of her throat, raw and ugly, as though her ribs were trying to collapse from the weight inside her. She pressed both hands to her face, trying to hold everything in, but it spilled out anyway. Shaking cries, broken gasps, the kind of weeping that scraped along her throat like broken glass. She wasn't crying just because of the slap. It was everything. The years of walking on eggshells. The nights spent pretending everything was fine for the sake of her son. The quiet fear that this moment, this exact moment, was always coming. Now it has. And she felt like she was breaking. Her sobs came fast and uncontrollable, her body folding in on itself, arms wrapped around her knees as she cried into the silence. She didn't even try to hold it back. Didn't try to be strong. She just wept, painfully, openly, like something inside her had cracked wide open. She stayed there for a long moment. On the floor, heart breaking, soul unraveling. The memories swirled, her son's first giggle, his tiny hand wrapping around her finger, the way he used to call her, Mama, before he learned to say, Mom. His laughter, his innocent questions, the way he desperately clung to her after his first nightmare. Not a monster. Never a monster. Mom. The soft voice pierced through the silence like a needle through silk. She froze. Her breath hitched in her throat as she slowly turned her head toward the stairs. There, barely visible in the dim light of the hallway, stood her son. Pajamas rumpled, small hands curled tightly at his sides, and those familiar blue eyes shimmering with fresh tears. His lip trembled, her heart shattered all over again. Sweetheart, she whispered, trying to gather herself, trying to push the pain down, bury it deep where he wouldn't see. She attempted a smile, strong and warm, just for him. But the moment her cheek moved, white-hot pain shot through her face like lightning, and she flinched. He noticed. His expression crumpled. She held her cheek for a moment, then lowered her hand slowly, breathing through her nose to steady herself. How long have you been up? She asked gently, her voice hoarse. He didn't answer. How much did you hear? His head dropped in shame. A silence heavier than anything that had come before settled between them. He looked so small standing there in the hallway, shoulders hunched, pajamas hanging off his thin frame, eyes red-rimmed and filled with guilt too big for his tiny body. She sighed softly, blinking through her own tears, and opened her arms. Come here, baby. He hesitated, but took one slow step. Then another. Until he ran into her arms with all the force his little body could manage, throwing himself into her embrace and clinging to her like she was the last safe place in the world. She wrapped her arms around him, holding him close, tucking his head beneath her chin as fresh sobs tore from his chest. I'm sorry, he cried, muffled against her shirt. I'm sorry for being a bad son. I'm sorry for getting you hurt. I'm sorry for being a mons. Her arms tightened around him. No, she whispered fiercely, her voice trembling but sure. Don't say that. Don't you ever say that. But Dad said. He said I was. He hiccuped, voice breaking, a monster, and it's my fault, everything's my fault. No, sweetheart, look at me. She gently pulled back just enough to cup his face in her hands, flinching again from the pain in her cheek, but pushing through it for him. She tilted his head up so their eyes met, hers filled with tears, his overflowing. You are not a monster, do you hear me? Her thumb wiped at the tear tracing down his cheek. You are my son. You are kind, caring, and brave, even when you're scared. He shook his head weakly, but she pressed her forehead against his and whispered, I'm sorry you had to see that. I'm so sorry. He sniffled, hands trembling as they gripped her shirt. It's my fault. No, she said again, firmer now. None of this is your fault. Not the nightmares, not the fighting, not tonight, nothing. They sat there on the floor, wrapped in each other, mother and son surrounded by the echo of a broken home. She kissed the top of his head, ignoring the way her cheek screamed at the movement. I will always love you. Blank. Doc calmly walked along the edge of the lake, hands tucked loosely in his coat pockets, boots crunching over the packed dirt with every step. The water lapped quietly at the shore, light dancing across its rippling surface as the sun dipped lower in the sky. His gaze found Hound easily, sitting in the grass like a statue with his dragon mask catching the last of the fading light. Daisy, his newly acquired horse, knelt beside him without a care in the world, lazily chewing through a carrot he gave her. Coco was curled up on the other side, her head resting on Hound's lap, eyes half-lidded as she leaned into his hand for an ear scratch. Doc stopped a few feet away, taking a moment to take it all in. Then he sat down beside him, not close enough to crowd, but not too far either. Both of them stared out at the water. For a while, neither of them said anything as they enjoyed the beauty of nature. But Doc wasn't here for the view. The people at the camp are going to be a lot harder to convince to go back with us now. Hound let out a low sigh, his hand pausing on Coco's head. Yeah, he murmured. Figured as much. Doc tilted his head, eyes still on the water. They've been whispering all afternoon, saying we're dangerous, that we're a threat to the kids, that Shane should make us leave before we do something worse. Rick's been trying to calm him down, but he gave a slight shrug as if saying, what can you do? You know how people are. Loud ones get heard while quiet ones stay silent. Hound didn't respond immediately. Instead, he looked down at Coco, then at Daisy. His hand moved slowly over the dog's thick fur, thoughtful. I know for a fact, he said at last, that neither of us give a damn what they think. Doc hummed in agreement, amused. That's true. He reached into his pocket and handed Hound a piece of paper. Hawk wants you to scout the woods, look for any walkers or threats to the camp. And him? Hound asked while taking the paper. He's gonna talk to Rick, offer him and anyone willing to listen to come with us back to base. Hopefully they accept our offer, but if they don't. Doc shrugged again. We'll grab some walkers and take care of them anyway. There was a long pause between them. The sun had almost dipped below the treeline now, casting long orange fingers across the lake. Doc stood up slowly, brushing grass from his coat. You gonna be all right out here? Hound nodded, confident. Yeah. Doc gave a soft pat to his shoulder. I'll let you off easy this once, but next time you break the rules of dibs, I'm kicking you in the balls. A short chuckle slipped from beneath the mask, dry and sharp. No promises. Doc offered a lazy two-finger salute and turned, walking back toward the camp, the sound of his footsteps slowly fading into the trees. Hound remained where he was, hand resting on Coco. Daisy huffed softly beside him, ears flicking. He looked down at the folded paper curiously, wondering why Doc gave it to him. Hound unfolded the paper. At first, he expected coordinates, patrol routes, maybe a quick sketch of potential walker trails or a scavenging route. But what met his eyes made him pause. The letter was written in uneven, bubbly handwriting, the kind only a child could manage. Crayon scrawls of blue and pink danced across the top. Thank you for protecting me and Carl. You and Coco are really cool. Your mask looks like a dragon. Dragons protect people, right? Sophia. Beneath the words, she had drawn a picture. A small stick figure with blonde hair holding a doll, herself, stood between two taller figures. One was clearly Hound, distinguishable by a massive, exaggerated dragon skull on his head. Beside him was Coco, drawn with 4 oversized paws and a lolling tongue the size of her head. In front of them loomed a big, scribbled monster. Red eyes, gaudy hands, ugly teeth, fat and vague. But Hound and Coco stood between it and the kids, their arms and paws stretched protectively wide. Carl was there too, shorter, with a sheriff's hat far too big for his little stick head. Hound stared at the drawing for a long moment. The crayon lines, the crooked letters, and the childish boldness in how she'd drawn him like a guardian out of a storybook. A faint breath escaped him, a sound that might have been a chuckle, might have been a laugh. The closest thing to a real smile he'd shown all day pulled at the corner of his mouth behind the mask. He folded the letter carefully, creasing the edges with a gentleness he rarely used. And without a word, he tucked it into his inner coat pocket, close to the heart. The dragon mask turned back to the lake, and for a while longer, Hound sat there in silence. Coco nuzzled his side, sensing the shift in his mood to be a happier one. Blank. The fire crackled and burned, casting flickering orange light across the circle of weary faces gathered around it. Smoke drifted lazily into the darkening air, carrying with it the scent of sizzling meat, roasted corn, and something vaguely sweet. It was the best meal they'd had in weeks. Laughter echoed around the camp, small, cautious at first, but growing with each passing minute. Rick sat with his family near the edge of the firelight, a warm plate in his hands, and Carl curled up beside him, wearing his hat, chewing happily on a piece of chicken like he hadn't eaten in days. He probably hadn't, not properly, none of them had. But tonight, for a few precious hours, it almost felt normal. Almost. Lori sat on the other side of him, legs tucked up under her, picking at her plate. Her shoulders were tense despite the warmth of the fire. Rick caught it immediately. You haven't touched much, he said softly, nudging her with his elbow. She glanced at him, offering a small, tight smile. I'm fine. Rick didn't push right away. He gave it a minute. Then he leaned in closer, his voice quiet enough not to carry. It's about them, isn't it? Lori looked at him now. Really looked. You brought 3 armed men in masks into our camp, Rick. He held her gaze, steady. And they saved my life more than once, they earned my trust. Her frown deepened, worry creasing her brow. That doesn't mean they're not dangerous. You saw what happened earlier, one of them almost gutted a man right in front of the kids. He didn't, he defended immediately. He stopped himself, and from what I've been hearing around camp, the man deserved more than just a broken jaw. He had a knife out, Rick. I've had a gun out before, Rick replied calmly. Doesn't mean I shot someone. Her eyes dropped to the fire again, the reflection of it danced in her eyes, and for a moment, she looked impossibly tired. I don't know, Rick, she said finally. I don't like the way they look at the others around the camp, especially with those awful masks. I'd be dead without them, the former sheriff tried to reason, wanting her to see what he saw. Lori, they're good people, you have to trust me on this. They got supplies, food, houses, a community, and they are willing to let us be part of it. Lori's lips pressed into a thin line. And what do they want in return? Rick hesitated. Nothing, he said truthfully. They haven't asked for a damn thing, they just want to help. That, more than anything, seemed to unsettle her. I don't trust anyone who gives something for nothing, his wife muttered. Then trust in me, he sighed quietly. I promise that I will never put you or Carl in danger. Lori didn't answer, but she didn't argue again, either. She simply leaned into his side, resting her head against his shoulder as the fire crackled on, and he rested his head on hers. None the wiser to the hurt and anger-filled eyes on them from across the fire. They stayed like that for what felt like hours, but stopped when they became aware of the sound of laughter slowly beginning to fade. It was subtle at first, a few chuckles dying off, a voice trailing mid-sentence, but then the shift became unmistakable. The mood changed, like a cold wind had blown through the campfire, stealing away the warmth. Rick looked up just in time to see Hawk walking out of the darkness, mask gleaming faintly in the firelight, his footsteps light but deliberate. He didn't say a word as he approached, but his presence alone was enough to draw every eye. Conversations died on tongues. Rick stood slowly, instinct prickling at the back of his neck as he looked at the masked man with concern. Lori did the same beside him, wary. Hawk, Rick said, trying to cut through the silence. Something wrong. Hawk stopped a few feet from the fire, just close enough to let the light hit his mask. Yes. His voice was calm. This place isn't safe. A murmur rippled through the camp. Rick blinked, confused. Come on, guy. What exactly do you mean by that? Shane asked, glaring at Hawk heatedly at what he was implying. Hawk turned his head slightly, addressing not just Rick now, but everyone within earshot, which, given how quiet the camp had gotten, was damn near everyone. Well, except for Ed, who was currently passed out inside his tent with a broken jaw. This camp is too exposed, Hawk explained, loud enough for everyone to hear, crossing his arms. It's too spread out, supplies are unguarded, tents are scattered, and the perimeter has blind spots. If a herd comes from the east, you won't have time to escape. If bandits find you, you'll lose half your people before you can rally. A few faces turned toward each other, uneasy. Dale furrowed his brow, thinking about the truth behind his words. Andrea sat up straighter while hugging her sister protectively, who was unconsciously nodding along. How long have you been sitting on that? Glenn asked, putting his empty plate down. Noticed it the moment we got here, Hawk said without flinching. Didn't say anything at first because it wasn't our call. Shane stepped forward, his voice tense. And now it is. No, Hawk said, but we're giving you a choice. He paused, letting his words settle like dust in the firelight. There's a place. Secure, fortified, and guarded. We have housing, water, enough food for everyone, and medicine. We even have a school for your kids. It's not perfect, far from it, but it's real, and it's growing. And we are more than happy to accept any of you who are willing to join us. Silence. Every face stared at him now, lit by fire and suspicion. That sounds like bullshit, someone muttered, not at all believing anything he said. Sounds like a trap, another added, agreeing with them. But not all eyes were hostile. There were flickers of something else in those who wanted more than to just survive. Hope. Rick saw it in Glenn's wide smile. In Carol's pale, exhausted face as she looked at her daughter. In Jackie's careful stillness while her eyes lit up. Even Lori, sitting beside him, seemed unsure now. Hawk didn't try to convince them with flowery words or promises. He just looked at them all and told it to them straight, we're heading back in 4 days, make up your minds by then. And with that, he turned and walked away, leaving nothing behind but the weight of his offer. The camp was split between refusing and those who accepted their offer. Rick could feel Shane's glare on him, as if he was blaming him for what happened. Blank. Merle laughed, having heard everything while he was out taking a piss. Well, looks like we have a reason to stick with these fuckers after all. Merle swaggered back toward his tent, boots crunching over dry leaves, a crooked grin plastered across his face. Well, shit, he had come back from taking a piss behind the tree line just in time to hear the masked freak's little speech, and boy, wasn't that a game changer. A community, fortified, food, drugs, a goddamn school. He had originally pegged these people as easy marks, bleeding hearts, and sheep just waiting to be sheared. His original plan was simple: wait until they let their guard down, swipe whatever was worth taking, grab Daryl, and vanish into the woods before anyone knew what hit him. But now he had a reason to stay. Robbing them of canned beans and old blankets seemed downright stupid when there was a whole damn community full of supplies waiting just beyond the forest. Merle's grin widened as he ran a hand down his face, practically buzzing with the possibilities. A real base. With hot food, walls, maybe even a working shower. Hell, he might even find himself a proper bed for once. And if those masked freaks were the kind that knew how to fight and didn't flinch at blood. Even better. They make perfect meat shields. He reached the edge of camp, where his tent was located, just as he spotted movement up the trail. His grin returned in full when he saw the source. Daryl, shirt clinging with sweat and face dusted in dirt, was trudging back from the woods with a freshly killed deer dragging over his shoulders, the antlers scraping against the bark of passing trees. Merle let out a low whistle. Well, I'll be damned, baby brother, he drawled, stepping into Daryl's path. Look at you, bringin' home the bacon. Daryl frowned, shifting the weight of the carcass and narrowing his eyes. Why are you smilin' like that? Merle chuckled and tossed an arm around Daryl's shoulders, minding the deer. Just thinkin' 'bout our future, little brother, big things on the horizon. Daryl jerked his shoulder free, suspicious. What the hell you on about? Merle just winked. Let's just say we might be traddin' up. No more tents, no more scraps. Real beds and real walls. Hell, maybe even some hot water. Daryl stared at him like he'd grown a second head. Merle clapped him on the back, grin still riding high. Stick with me, baby brother. We might just come out of this world sittin' pretty.